This content is brought to you by Link2, which makes private equity investment very easy. Link2 is democratizing the process of being able to invest into tech companies and crypto companies. Previously, this opportunity was only available to venture capitalists, hedge funds, and investment firms. Well, now, if you are an accredited investor, you can get this opportunity before you to be able to invest into crypto companies like Ripple, BitPay, Dapper Labs, Uphold, Abra, and many more. Link2 continues to add these respective companies and their portfolio is growing. So this is a great opportunity to double dip, to be able to hold the crypto tokens such as Ethereum, Algorand, XRP, or whatever it may be, and also invest into the companies that are building the infrastructure of the crypto market. And Link2 was part of the group that invested into Coinbase pre-IPO. And of course, that did really well for them. Well, you have the opportunity to catch the next Coinbase with Link2. So definitely check them out. It's once again the opportunity to double dip, just like the VCs, just like the hedge funds. Check out Link2, link in the description. Welcome back to the Thinking Crypto podcast, your home for cryptocurrency news and interviews. With me today is Ron Hammond, who's Director of Government Relations at the Blockchain Association. Ron, great to have you back on the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Really appreciate it.
Well, Ron, it wasn't the 4th of July yesterday, but there were fireworks in the hearing with the SEC Director of Enforcement. I would love to get your thoughts on what happened. We saw some aggressiveness and some interesting tones and things that were brought up, pretty detailed and very targeted. What is your take on the entire meeting?
Yeah, sure thing. It's definitely a reckoning, to say the least. This hearing that happened, for those who may not be aware, yesterday on Tuesday, the 19th, there was a hearing in the Capital Markets Subcommittee within the House Financial Services Committee. So this is typically the committee that deals a lot with crypto legislation to begin with. So a lot of these members have been informed for quite some time on the issue, whether it be pro or against. And for those in the crypto community, you might be familiar with the infamous Brad Sherman from California, the Democrat, who does chair that subcommittee. So this is his call to have this hearing. It was the first time in 4 years, actually, that the SEC Enforcement Division had been brought in and had some at least accountability or transparency with Congress. So that was really, really important. But for all intents and purposes, even though it was the Director of Enforcement, Graywall, testifying, this is more of a referendum, at least, on Gary Gensler. There's a lot of comments from members of Congress really focusing on Gensler's recent actions or movements, just not in crypto alone, ESG and other things on proxy advisors too. But Graywall was taking the brunt of a lot of those questions, even though some of it was not as much in his jurisdiction per se.
Yeah. And, it's funny, Brad Sherman, this time around, he wasn't talking about Mongoose Coin, but he was very specific, and he was mentioning XRP and the Ripple lawsuit, and that the SEC should be going after crypto exchanges, which seems a big change in his tone. What are your thoughts on that? It seems like he's, maybe talking to other people and learning more about what's happening.
Yeah, definitely. One thing that happened when I was a Hill staffer is that you still talk to the regulators all the time, even if you don't agree with necessarily their position. It's always good to get their input and their take, and sometimes again carry the efforts that they want you to lead on in Congress, because obviously they need Congress to authorize a lot of their appropriations, as well as some many internal things that they do at the SEC. So it seems like Brad Sherman has gotten a lot more education on the topic, because now he's calling out individual cryptocurrencies instead of going for Mongoose Coin or Snake Coin or whichever ones he wanted to talk about, which is sad, because actually they kind of did like those analogies, as funny as they were. And so, yeah, this is a big push in the SEC, though. We've seen this from Gary Gensler several times when he's testified in Congress and doing public speeches. He's been saying exchanges need to come in and register with the SEC. Of the thousands of cryptocurrencies or hundreds that you do list, U.S. exchanges, we think one of them is security. We're not going to tell you which one it is, but why don't you come on in, come in, register with the SEC, and we'll find a way to kind of have a path forward. And he's been using things like exemptive authority recently in his tone and language. So we've seen this being a big push from Gensler, and a lot of folks in the lobbying space have been speculating, is this going to be leading to an enforcement action, especially with all the issues with Terra and Celsius and others out there? Does this kind of give them the move to go forward and go after some exchanges? If we look back at historical enforcement actions in crypto, it's been usually going after the top players, again, kind of like the Ripple situation, and having that set the tone for the rest of the industry down the line. And so, major exchanges probably are very much concerned with those comments. And it looks like Brad Sherman is encouraging the SEC to do just what Gary Gensler wants. But thankfully, though, we have folks on the other side of the aisle, and actually even folks on the Democrat side too, who've been pushing back and say, look, we think the enforcement division has gone way too far and out of bounds when it comes to crypto. Instead of putting resources to the enforcement staff to go after crypto, they should be going to the policy staff and creating a regulatory framework for crypto that the industry has been clamoring for years. And so that's been, at least something that the SEC has been as open to. I mean, Commissioner Peirce has been very vocal about that. But unfortunately, we do see some folks in Congress who are trying to push the SEC narrative as well. So hopefully, though, this is going to be changing. And one thing I'll also highlight is that the Republicans were making it very clear to the SEC that they will be in charge likely come November when the elections happen. And so I think Emmer's words were a day of reckoning for the SEC. And so pretty harsh tones and time to remind them that if you guys want to get key nominations in next Congress or key appropriations, you're going to have to work with a Republican Congress. And it's a very angry Republican conference right now when it comes to the SEC's approach to crypto.
Yeah, I was pleasantly surprised by Congressman Tom Emmer and Warren Davidson. And, they kind of took the gloves off, so to speak, and they were very detailed and targeted as well. And as you said, Tom Emmer mentioning, a day of change or whatever it may be is coming. So it seems that the Democrats, now obviously we don't know the future, but they're going to lose. Republicans are going to take over, have more power, and there's going to be a lot more scrutiny on the SEC and Gary Gensler. How do you think that's going to play out? Is it going to get messy? You think Gary Gensler is going to keep going, or is he going to maybe backtrack a bit?
I think Gary Gensler, this is more speculative here, he's going to probably be a lot more aggressive on crypto, especially on the enforcement front. I think a lot of that, again, is just more in response to the market, as well as from folks in Congress saying there's a lot of crypto scams out there. Why aren't you going after them? I mean, even Representative Davidson, my former boss, said, look, there's a lot of cryptocurrencies out there that look like pump and dump schemes. And they're really apparent, really obvious, and they're hurting retail customers. But you're not going after them. You're going after the top US companies in the crypto space, and you're having that set the tone for everyone else while ignoring all of this easy wins for the SEC. That even the Republicans would be very happy for them to go after these folks. Unfortunately, that hasn't been the case. And we've seen a lot more the SEC having voluntary requests for information from these companies, and then utilizing that against those companies down the road in enforcement actions or settlements and such. And so and that's no way to regulate an industry. So Congress is definitely a little frustrated here. I think going forward, we're going to see two dynamics. We're going to see the CFTC still stake its claim saying, hey, look, even Republicans in the House Financial Services Committee or Senate Banking, the ones that do oversee the SEC, let's not forget about the CFTC and our role here with commodities, with Bitcoin, Ethereum being commodities classified by the SEC already. We want to make sure we can have more robust regulatory oversight of those cryptocurrencies when they become that commodity status. I think additionally, too, we're going to see more oversight of the SEC. It's unclear if Chair Gensler is going to come in front of Congress the rest of the year. But I guarantee you within the first 6 months or so, the Republicans are going to have him in, at least in the Senate or in the House in some way, shape, or form, and to have some concerns about his approach to, again, ESG, proxy advisors, crypto, and much more. So it's going to be a very, very quick-paced 2023. Now, mind you, there's still going to be a couple months where they have to form the committees and everything like that. So we'll see probably a little lag until about March or February. But don't get me wrong, it's going to be a pretty interesting time in 2023.
So, Ron, and maybe I'm a bit ignorant to the process, but so Congress, they make the laws, right? Can't they come together? We see bipartisan support, Democrats and Republicans. Can they come together and put together regulations, or do they need Gary Gensler and the SEC to work with them to do that? Can they say, okay, I'm going to go get former SEC officials and chairmen and whoever, put together a law and say, hey, Gary Gensler, here it is. This is going to law. Why is there this dynamic of going back and forth? Why can't Congress just put it together?
It comes down to the education, candidly. It's because it's a very complex topic. We try to do that early on when I was even a Hill staffer. Is that I try to bring former SEC commissioners, former regulators, and even in industry executives as well, academia, bring them all together and say, let's come up with a framework here. And even though it had 4 Republicans and 4 Democrats on the Token Taxonomy Act, that bill still stalled out because, as I mentioned, there's over 400 members of Congress here. So to move legislation, you're going to need more than just 4 Republicans and 4 Democrats. You also need buy-in from the most powerful members on these respective committees to move things. So Maxine Waters from California is the chair. So what she wants to do, it's her agenda. She can really move forward or kill things as she pleases because she has that power. So, and a lot of times we've seen this with the age gap as well, is that the older members of Congress, usually the ones who do have those senior committee positions that do move legislation, they haven't been as keen to crypto just because of the educational barrier, but also there's a generational barrier too. Whereas, a lot more younger Democrats that Maxine Waters has in her caucus are actually pretty positive on crypto. Richie Torres from New York, we have Jake Auchincloss from Massachusetts, Josh Gottheimer from New Jersey. So there is a collective younger Democrats who are really engaged on this issue. But power is usually with the seniority there, and they're the ones who could decide. And she has other priorities here too. So in the wake of Congress not acting, the regulators really just have a lot more leeway here. And that's where we've seen a lot of either the enforcement side of things from the SEC on crypto space, but also maybe some rules and regulations usually come up. And Congress can exert its authority to say you've overstepped. But when it's a complex subject matter, it can be kind of tough to get Congress to do stuff. So again, we're really, really close though. I will say what started off with 2 or 3 members of Congress in 2017 when I was a Hill staffer is now 50 plus in both the House and the Senate, both sides of the aisle. So it's a formidable force that's really growing. And I think we could potentially even see some stuff moving in legislation this year. But it'll be on things, again, that members of Congress can probably grapple with, and most notably probably stable coins. And again, there's still some talks and some rumors in the media right now of potentially a bill with Maxine Waters and Patrick McHenry, who are the 2 most powerful members of the Democrat and Republican financial services. But we'll see if it plays out. It's still a lot in flux, but we'll see if they put their weight behind this. This definitely could have a chance to move. So sit tight. It should be an exciting rest of the year.
And could a catalyst for maybe the older members and maybe lack of education be the fulfillment of the crypto executive order from President Biden, where all these folks have to do their research, come back with their recommendations and reports? Could the president, kind of light a fire to get folks to make this a priority?
Yes, definitely. And that's actually happened a lot before in policy in the past. It's just not just financial services or crypto. This just happens just generally when there's a study or there are efforts in an executive order that would give Congress recommendations. It pretty much tells them, hey, look, we've done all the research. We've done the critical analysis. Here is the legislative bill you need to pass Congress. And sometimes those recommendations can sit on the shelf for years. Sometimes they can get moved in a second. Back to your point, though, at least what's going to be the catalyst here. Let's also not forget things like Celsius and Terra and bad actions that do happen in the market. That drives action in Congress more than anything in the world. So as this contagion effect still continues throughout the crypto ecosystem, and we potentially do have more companies that do falter, this can really move Congress in a way to say, hey, look, this got to be tackled right now. And those are some of the conversations we're having, saying, how do we avoid a Celsius? How do we avoid a Terra situation? We're concerned about Tether. So these are questions I get all the time. And sometimes they're looking for what's the solution, what's the fix, so this doesn't happen again. Sometimes it's tough. Sometimes it's also how the market works, but it's a lot of education.
I want to circle back to Warren Davidson, Congressman Warren Davidson, and some of the statements he gave. It was actually very interesting because there's another layer to this Ripple lawsuit where he brought up a hypothetical of a speech given by Bill Hinman around Ethereum and so forth. And then the director of enforcement said, hey, I can't talk about that because that is potentially a realistic scenario being debated or discussed in the Ripple lawsuit. I think a lot of people are taken back by that. They're very targeted and specific. What are your thoughts on that and potential conflicts of interest that may be happening there with the SEC?
Yeah, that's I was trying to tell folks in my weekly Twitter thread that a lot of the court cases that are happening right now, the SEC just really can't comment on it because either A, it could affect the court case itself, or it could have a situation where it's just inappropriate to talk about it, considering that the judge may have a different opinion or a different view. And so a lot of members of Congress, sometimes when there is like a court case or a big thing, they try to get people to testify about it. And every single time they'll deflect just because, again, it's still an ongoing matter and it's out of their hands. And that's Warren Davidson had a great line of questioning on that front. It was a good hypothetical because he was able to not say the Ripple case, but everyone knew he was alluding to that, even the SEC enforcement director. So that's why he was able to pivot away. And again, it's not because the SEC is trying to hide something or anything to that effect. It's just because it's an ongoing matter. And what he says or could testify at could definitely affect that hearing, and he knows better to not comment on that. So it's unfortunate. I mean, we would love to get some of these answers ASAP. I know the community definitely wants to get a lot of these answers ASAP as well. But this is what happens when things get tied up in the courts, is that Congress has now less of an effect here. And that's why things like crypto regulation are so important, because we want to get this done in a more transparent process through Congress, rather than going through the courts, which could take years, as we're seeing with this lawsuit. So these things are, if this becomes the norm for crypto regulation, that we have to wait for every single court case to get finalized or more court cases to occur, the U.S. is going to fall behind. And so we really are pushing for Congress to lead in this space and trying to avoid the courts as much as possible, unless there's a bad rule regulation that just doesn't fit the industry or is not creating any parity with the traditional financial system. We'll definitely fight that for sure.
For sure. There's also, I know, talks about stablecoin regulations. Can you tell us the update on that? Will we see something this year? I even saw yesterday that on the UK side, they're about to push through some stablecoin regulations as well.
Yeah, stablecoins, it has been the hot thing for 2022. It was the thing that, early on back in January, I said we probably would have passed a bill on it this year. Then the Russia-Ukraine situation happened. We're getting close to an election year. But I will say in the past month, talks have really picked up recently. Congress does not have much time left in DC before the election. And for those who may not know, in August, most of the members of Congress go back to their respective districts to campaign. They're technically working two jobs as both a member of Congress, but also a candidate. So they're not here at all for the most part in August. The Senate sometimes is and is not. So it's a very limited bandwidth that can pass something. But talks have really picked up recently. They've been bipartisan so far, and they involve, as I mentioned, the key stakeholders here of Maxine Waters and Patrick McHenry. So we have big power players here. We have folks like Patrick Toomey, who is the Republican senator on Senate Banking, who's retiring this year. And he's been very passionate about stablecoin legislation for quite some time. I'm positive he probably wants to capstone his career in the Senate with a stablecoin bill passing. And so the question is there time for this to happen? Is there an agreement that both sides can come to around issues like, can non-banks issue stablecoins? Do you have to have a bank? Are banks the only ones who have a monopoly here? Additionally, are things like Tether allowed? Can you have stablecoins backed by something besides a dollar? These are questions that are still being debated on right now. And I think we will see hopefully a bipartisan compromise here. It might not be everything the industry wants, but that's how it happens with legislation. There's compromise, and that's important. And consumer protection is important as well. So we'll see. Hopefully, I'll have more of an update next week. But the good news is that there are talks, and they are high level, but they're still working on it. So my hope is we can get there pretty soon.
So along the lines of stablecoins, there's been talk of the digital dollar, and we know central banks around the world, they have been trying to build their CBDC. Is there any dovetailing of those two things, or are they entirely different or separate ends of the spectrum right now?
No, this central bank digital currency, the digital dollar you're referring to, that's definitely still in these conversations. For Democrats especially, this is something that they think could help the unbanked in this space. But there's also a lot of concerns from both sides of the aisle on privacy matters. Can the government see every single transaction that you're doing with your digital wallet? That is concerning. Again, from both sides. And so we've already had one study on a central bank digital currency from the government. I think we're going to probably see more down the road. There's also the executive order, which had a call for studying the central bank digital currency. So I think a lot of people are saying we're seeing what China's doing. We understand that we need to figure out what's our strategy here. But we also understand that if we take this step, there are some things we have to take into consideration. Again, privacy being the main crux here. So I think it's still going to be finalized. Hopefully, there's probably going to be more studies, but members of Congress, especially on the Republican side, are not too keen on the idea of a central bank digital currency right now. They prefer to utilize private sector stablecoins. Democrats are kind of split on the issue right now, but this is starting to become a little more partisan. So we'll see that gets closer in terms of agreement, but right now it's pretty polar from both sides.
Got it. And finally, I want to ask you about, are there any other hearings that we can expect coming up on the calendar for that's crypto related? Yeah.
So as I mentioned, August, most of the members of Congress are gone. So we probably won't be seeing anything on that front. There is a markup next week. A markup is when a bill basically goes to committee for a vote. And then the next step, this little schoolhouse rock, will go to the actual House floor or the Senate floor for a vote as well. But mind you, the Pelosi will be in charge of that. So right now, there could be a chance that we could see crypto bills in the markup for House Financial Services a week from today. There have been rumors that they might be doing a bill. And if I had to guess, it probably would be stable coins, but we will see. These things change all the time. So we'll hopefully have some clarity soon. August, we got nothing. Now, at the end of the hearing yesterday, Brad Sherman did mention that they're going to have probably an accounting standards hearing in September. I know that's not the most exciting thing in the world, but for those who may not be following it, there was a staff accounting bulletin from the SEC basically regarding to how do you count your crypto for banks on your balance sheet. And they also were trying to count them as liabilities. And so there's a lot of implications for that. And so a lot of folks in our membership, but also even with the traditional banks, are saying, we don't agree with this. This has a lot of bad implications on the accounting side. And they have engaged with Congress and the regulators on this. And so I can see crypto coming up in that hearing on accounting standards. Even though it's not the most sexy topic, it will still be very, very important, especially for the banks who are in the crypto space or who may be trying to get into the crypto space. Besides that, we haven't heard anything else yet. I know the Republicans are trying to bring Gary Gensler in one more time before the year ends, but if they don't get him, then they'll definitely have another shot next year. So we'll see.
Yeah, it looks like there's going to be fireworks later this year with the midterm elections and the implications for the SEC after that. Ron, always a pleasure, my friend. Thank you for joining us today.
I really appreciate it. Thanks again.